And welcome back to EH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is a new series that I'm starting about specifically removal. I've had a couple people ask me questions about removal, and as I say in a lot of my videos, removal wins games. I just find that people typically don't put enough removal in their decks. It is the great equalizer, okay? It doesn't matter what crazy thing your opponent is playing. A Krosan Grip or a Path to Exile or a Blasphemous Act will solve that problem usually, right? And I've had a lot of people ask me, how much should I put in? Which cards should I be using? The how much I should put in my deck is a little bit tough because it always depends on what you're doing. For example, if you have a really creature heavy deck, you probably don't want to put a ton of board wipes in there. Targeted removal might be more your thing. And of course, it always depends on the color, right? If you're playing a green deck, mono green deck, creature removal is going to be tough to find. If you're playing a Dimir deck, artifact enchantment removal is going to be tough to find. So that's why I'm starting out this series. So this is going to be essentially removal spells in specific colors. And I'm starting off this series with off-color removal. I thought it would be interesting to start with what kind of removal spells are in colors that typically you wouldn't have, right? So for example, I'm going to start with Aftershock. Aftershock is, probably should have had this in my 10 cards you should be putting in your decks. It's pretty good, destroy target artifact, creature, or land. It deals 3 damage to you. So the 3 damage, who cares? 4 mana, it's a sorcery, it's not super terrific. However, I love the versatility. Any removal spell with versatility is fantastic. This is not super off color because red can destroy artifacts and lands, but destroying a creature specifically is very rare in red. No strings attached, just destroy a creature for 4 mana in red is pretty good. So that's why I put it in this list. It's not something you typically see in red. Coming in at number 9, Avoid Fate. So this is 1 mana, counter target instant or aura spell that targets permanent you control. So it's a counter spell in green. And I know everyone's going to say, okay, well, what about Veil of Summer? Veil of Summer is so much better than this. Yes and no. I didn't put any color-specific stuff in here, right? So what that means, like Veil of Summer, for example, only works on blue and black stuff, right? If somebody wants to path your creature, Avoid Fate is going to save it. Veil of Summer is not. Okay, so I stayed away from anything color-specific. Red Elemental Blast is another one that's not in this list. Maybe I'll make another list for stuff like that, but there's nothing color-specific in here. This is just cards that are going to save you. And by the way, counter spells I consider to be removal, okay? It's solving a problem, right? When I say removal, basically what I mean is I'm solving an issue. My opponent is going to cast an expropriate and I counter that. To me, that's, you're solving a problem. You're saving yourself from certain doom. So Avoid Fate, it's not typically what you would consider removal, and it's not super fantastic. It's just a card that you don't normally see it in green, and that's what this list is all about. It's about removal spells that are off color. Number 8, Lapse of Certainty. Lapse of Certainty is probably the white counterspell that you see the most. It's just a straight up counterspell. It's going to put it on top of their library, so it's not great because they're just going to get it back the next turn. But it is technically a hard counterspell. There is no strings attached here. It's just counterspell, period. So if your opponent's about to expropriate or do something that's going to end the game, this will actually save the day. Coming in at number 7, Imp's Mischief. This is, again, not typically removal. But again, it is solving a problem. Usually these redirect things you see in blue and red, so it certainly is off color. You're going to change the target of a spell or ability, right? To me, this is solving a problem. Someone's going to path again, just like with Avoid Fate, someone's going to path your creature. You redirect it to another creature. You're saving your creature. You're solving a problem. Coming in at number 6, Aura Flux. So when I made my first Dimir deck, I avoided Dimir for the longest time because it doesn't deal with artifacts or enchantments, which is brutal. And in Commander, not being able to deal with artifacts or enchantments is rough. And I had a hard time. I made a Rona deck. That was my first Dimir deck. And I loved the deck, but I hated the fact that I couldn't deal with artifacts or enchantments. This deals with enchantments, sort of. I'm really pushing the boundaries here with regards to removal because, again, we're talking about things that these colors typically can't do. So what's a solution that we can use, right? Aura Flux, if you're playing a mono blue deck, each other enchantment gains during your upkeep. So it's every other enchantment. Aura Flux doesn't have this, but every other enchantment on the battlefield, you're going to have to pay 2 or sacrifice it. So it's not technically removal. Your opponents can pay to save it, but man, if you're playing against an enchantment tribal deck, this is a serious solution to that problem. Next up, Hostage Taker. People usually, I don't think of this one as off-color removal, but it is, right? This deals with artifacts, right? When it enters the battlefield, you exile an artifact or creature until it leaves the battlefield, and you can cast it. It's the artifact part here that is important. This is another card that I put in my Rona deck right away because I'm like, it's a card in Dimir that can deal with artifacts. It is a temporary removal, but then you can cast it, right? So if you end up casting that card and putting it into play under your control, then you're actually dealing with it. So, again, you're jumping through a few hoops, but it is a way in Dimir to deal with artifacts if you need something for that. Coming in at number 4, Rebuff the Wicked. This is one that I have mentioned a few times on this channel. I love it. I use it in all my mono white decks. Sometimes I'll put it in an Orzhov deck as well. Just counter target spell that targets a permanent you control. 1 mana. Just 1 mana. It's a straight up counter spell for anyone who wants to kill your commander, destroy something you have in play. If you're just playing any white deck where you have a commander that you really want to keep on the table, or any permanent that you really want to keep on the table, this is just a great inclusion. Coming in at number 3, Devolt's Trickery, and to probably no one's surprise, the top 3 on this list are all very new cards because they really tend to be going in this direction. And I think this is why, again, just to go on a little bit of a divergent rant here, I've talked about how all of these standard sets, how every set is sort of getting engineered towards Commander. And this is another thing that they have been doing, is they have been printing off-color spells, off-color removal, because it helps, mono red deck now has an answer to stuff, right? They've been doing that a lot, and I don't love that per se, and I don't love this card. This was in my 10 Kaldheim cards that you should avoid because I actually don't think it's fantastic. However, I would put this in a mono red deck just because when someone casts that Cyclonic Rift or that Expropriate or that Craterhoof Behemoth, instead of just maybe the game being over, you're going to save your life and have at least a chance, right? So it is great for that. Number 2, Feed the Swarm. Again, this is another card recently printed that is just, Wizard of the Coast to me is just saying, okay, well, mono black decks can't deal with enchantments, so why don't we throw them a bone, right? Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls, you lose life equal to its converted mana cost. The destroy target creature part should never be used on this, I don't think. I mean, it could, which is good. The fact that it is diverse and you can use it for both is good, but I gotta think that 9 times out of 10, this is removing an enchantment because black can't do this. This is an absolute staple in any mono black deck. Being able to remove an enchantment, that's what removal wins games is all about, right? I say that because your opponent casts an Omniscience, and if you can't answer that, then what do? Right? You just have to win the game before they do. That's the only thing, right? This just gets rid of that. Oh, you have to take, 9 or 10 damage? Oh, well. It's better than losing, right? So this is just an auto include in every mono black deck. It's an auto include in every Dimir deck too, because again, blue can't deal with enchantments. And it's also an auto include in every Rakdos deck because red can't deal with enchantments either. So this goes in so many decks. That's why it's my number 2 on this list. And my number 1 on this list is Raven Form. Again, another card that just came out. I mean, man, if this was just exile a creature, its controller gets a 1/1. If you took the artifact part out of this, it is still a phenomenal card, right? 3 mana to exile a creature and they get a bird token, and you can foretell it and it only costs 1. To me, that's an auto include in every mono blue deck. Exiling is always going to be way better than just destroying. Exiling really makes a big difference in a lot of situations, but the fact that they put artifact on here too is incredible. And again, destroying an artifact, that's something, but it's exile. You're exiling an artifact or creature. Man, that's so good. And the Foretell really puts this over the top because you can just stick it in Foretell at the start of the game, and then for 1 mana on a later turn. It's just so good. It's an auto include in every blue deck. Okay, so every mono blue deck is going to put this in for sure because now you can deal with artifacts. Also, you can deal with creatures. I mean, mono blue does deal with creatures fairly well. There is a lot of, reality shift and rapid hybridization and cards like that. Another addition to that is not bad at all, but the fact that it can deal with artifacts is just way too good. So this goes in every mono blue deck. Every Dimir deck is going to want this. I would even possibly give it consideration in an Izzet deck. because red doesn't exile, right? So like a lot of commander players, I see cards like this and Feed the Swarm and I'm like, yay, now I have an answer for my mono black deck or my mono blue deck. And that, again, that's why I think that Wizards of the Coast is printing cards like this now. But at the same time, then, I start thinking, oh, is this good though? Is this, there is a downside. Blue already has all these advantages and black already has all these advantages. Card draw and counter spells and all, and tutors and all these things. Can't we have some downsides for them? Now we're giving them answers, so now they don't have to worry about that either. Next they're going to be printing mono green spells that kill creatures, and then green's not going to have any issues either. I just don't want to go down that road too much. So that is my list of 10 cards off color removal. Is what I'm calling this, cards that if you're in that color, specifically monocolored decks, and you're looking for an answer to certain things, these are some of those answers. And like I said, there will be more of these, so stay tuned for that, and thanks for tuning in.